Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. We're going to have probably a shorter episode today. I don't have too much to discuss, but there have been some things that have happened and a couple of things I wanted to talk about, actually, so kind of excited for that. I think you probably clicked on this episode because I want to discuss this whole Timepiece Gentleman fiasco that's gone on. I'm not trying to get people to click on this. I just have had so many people reaching out to me about this specific topic, and I kind of want to just put my message out there for, this is my message. I can point people in the direction of this. It really is a fiasco for the dealers, watch dealers, but also just the watch community as a whole. If you thought 2023 was bad for watches, this or the last, probably 16 months at this point, if you thought it's been bad, I think this is another just terrible thing to happen in the community, and so I will be addressing that. But I'll discuss some other things, of course, because I literally don't want to spend the whole time talking about this. But I will talk about this first. So as I normally do, I normally put links in the show notes to all of the things that we discussed in this podcast, but I really don't feel like putting a link to this. Again, I want to just sort of send the message from my perspective on this and not really link to any other stories where more can be made of this. So if you don't know, Timepiece Gentleman is basically a British watch dealer and a huge influence on the YouTube side of the watch community. Anthony Ferreira is the individual who sort of runs Timepiece Gentleman, and he's had a fairly large amount of success, and he's a pretty respected and trusted by his followers and people who trust him to help him get watches. He's worked in the watch industry for some time now, and as I mentioned, is really active on social medias. I think if you think about sort of the iconic YouTube channels, his one definitely comes up as one of them. I'm speaking maybe from the longevity of watches and watch collecting. He was even part of the 2019 top 100 watch influencers in the world. He was part of that by Watch Pro magazine. And so you can imagine, huge influence, hugely important in the dealer community. He's probably worked with many dealers that you all know of. So very, very well respected. But it came out that he sent a sort of mass email to his clients, or some of his big clients, admitting that he had essentially lost some of the inventory that they had entrusted him with. Now, something that's very common in the watch industry is basically to do consignments. So consignments, if you don't know, is basically where a dealer will take a watch on consignment, look for a buyer, sell the watch, and then take a fee from the final sale price as sort of the fee that they get for selling the watch. So essentially what you're doing is trusting the dealer with your watch, trusting that they'll be able to sell the watch, and then, pay them the fee off of the final sale price. Dealers do this all the time. It's very, very common. A lot of the times you actually see multiple dealers do work on these types of deals. So it's a very common practice in the watch industry, and it's not something that's unknown. But right there and then, you are entrusting a dealer with your watch. You are trusting that they will act in good faith. You'll trust that they'll get you the best price they possibly can. And so there's already a lot of trust if you're saying, I want to consign my watch with you, which is really interesting because if you think about it, Timepiece Gentleman had created a lot of trust in the community, and so why would someone suspect that something would go wrong through the consignment process with him? But basically what happened in this mass email is that he admitted that essentially he lost his Richard Mille when he was out, and then he at the same time lost a bag of inventory that was approximately $2 million US. the majority of which were consigned pieces. Now, later there was a alleged recording of him speaking on the phone, where he actually said that maybe he didn't lose the bag. There are so many gray areas of this, and it's not really the point of why I want to talk about it. But there was a recording that basically said that it was something like closer to $5 million US, and of course, and it wasn't because he lost the bag. I think he was essentially, using the funds of the sales in the way that he saw fit, which many believe to be a Ponzi scheme. I'm not gonna, this is all alleged. I'm not sort of talking about this at all from I'm not talking this from facts. I've never spoken to Timepiece Gentleman. I've never actually worked directly with Timepiece Gentleman, so I really don't have any helpful information from a factual perspective. This is all just hearsay. But what I really wanted to talk about was what this does to the watch community. So, it's hard not to be frustrated with the fact that this really damages the watch community. So I think what has happened is we've had so much hype about watches, and so many more people are getting into watches, and that's really exciting for the community because it means we can share this passion with so many more people. Then there was somewhat of a bubble that crashed. Prices of models that many people were really, really interested started sinking, and I think that frustrated a lot of people, and then that led to more collectors sort of dumping, or I should say newer collectors dumping their watches because they were losing so much money on them. And then we've kind of gotten to a place where prices are still somewhat dropping, but kind of in some sort of stable place. And then we get this huge fiasco with $5 million in inventory missing, a huge figure in the watch industry basically admitting that he was running his business in a way that wasn't ethical. And I think that's just going to turn off more and more people who have got into this hobby. So there's two buckets, right? There's collectors and dealers. Collectors who have been in the watch industry or been a watch collector for a short time, I think are going to run scared, and that's really, really upsetting because it's not what this community is supposed to be about. This community isn't supposed to be about all these dodgy people who you have to work with. That's not the type of environment that we should be creating. And it's really sad because you're going to turn off newer collectors because of all this fiasco. Dealers are also going to be affected by this, not just the people who've worked directly with Timepiece Gentleman, but now every single time when someone deals with a dealer, the individual dealing with the dealer, the customer, the client, is going to be skeptical, and they're going to be worried that this person is not running an ethical business because this huge figure who was so well renowned and so well respected in the industry basically turned bad, and it's not great. It really is not great for dealers either. So you've got lower trust in dealers. You've got less people who are probably going to feel safe in the watch collecting community, and that just really is unfortunate. Now, I think I can speak to maybe what needs to happen going forward. The most important thing is to be enjoying this hobby and to be sharing it with collectors who enjoy it as much as you do. If that means that you have to do twice as much work to gain their trust, to provide them with what they need to feel comfortable to buy watches from you, or to collect watches with you and feel comfortable talking to you about watches, then so be it. And in my opinion, this actually might be a good thing. That means that people are going to be much more thorough in their approaches when buying watches, or much more thorough in understanding who they're buying from. I'll go back to the John Goldberg, Al Montanari, his golden rule. One of his golden rules was buy the seller. It's buy what you love and buy the seller. And if that means you're going to have to do additional research to understand who you're dealing with, that's great. I think that allows you to create a much more trusting and long-lasting relationship with the person who you're going to buy watches from. And that's exciting. I think that is a positive. And I think that means that you as dealers have to be so much more forthcoming with information, and so much more they have to really earn the trust of their customers, and I think that's a really great thing. this is going to turn off collectors, and I'm sure that the watch community is already being hurt by it. But you can learn from this. Make sure you trust your dealers and you trust the processes that you've put in place. I've never worked with Timepiece Gentleman. Probably will never work with Timepiece Gentleman based on this, but yeah, I guess that's kind of my 2 cents on this whole fiasco. I'd say move forward with positivity. I'd say move forward in watch collecting in a way where you can really build trust with those who you're dealing with, and who you're collecting with, because that's the point of it, right? You have to trust the people that you're talking with and discussing some of these ideas about and buying watches from. It's super important. It's gonna hurt, and hopefully us as a community can come together and really build something that will not be tainted by such a terrible thing to happen in the watch community. Anyway, there's not going to be a link in the show notes. I don't want to continue this discussion too much longer, but I hope this helps sort of give you my 2 cents on this. And if you haven't heard about it, hopefully it helps you sort of inform you on what's going on. Anyway, we'll move forward to the things that I will link up. I've got 2 more topics to go here. So what was really cool is I was on Hodinkee and I was reading this article about the 37mm Royal Oak with a turquoise dial. This is, of course, a modern piece, and my initial reaction was, oh, why are we doing the Tiffany blue still? But what was cool is this is actually a stone dial. So what you're getting is a unique stone dial that is, because it's stone, you're not going to get 2 identical dials to it. So there's going to be different lights that are sort of played with on these specific dials. So I think that's kind of unique. That stone, because you're using different stones for each of the watches, you won't get 2 things that are completely identical, which I think is nice. But it got me thinking about places where you can actually find stone dials, and so I wanted to make sure that you as a listener had, an opportunity to see other watches that are kind of this trend. Recently, I've noticed that, obviously this year I feel like a big trend is smaller watches, interesting dials, interesting case designs. Doesn't have to be the typical sort of, steel sports watches that have been popular so far. I think people are trying to get a little bit more creative with the pieces that they're interested in. I think that's great. And if you don't know of places where you can get these, I'm hoping you can maybe get these if you're looking for watches, but also consume information about companies who really focus on these types of watches. And so I wanted to point you in the direction of Amsterdam Vintage Watches. There'll be a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. But Amsterdam Vintage Watch Houses is obviously an Amsterdam-based watch company who obviously specialize in specific watches. It seems like Rolex is a very big part of sort of their inventory, but they have a whole host of different pieces. King of Vintage is the Instagram. I highly recommend you check them out because there's some really cool videos on there. But what's really cool is the individual who runs Amsterdam Vintage Watches actually studied as a gemologist, and so he actually has a bit of respect and a bit of knowledge about different types of stones, and so his inventory is so cool. So I'll leave a link in the show notes to the shop so you can check this out. But for example, I see a Rolex Day-Date with a mother of pearl dial, which is so unique compared to a fairly simple one. There's also he also has a reference 1600 date just with a red jasper, nicknamed sort of the red jasper because it has a jasper red gemstone dial, which again is so unique, and furthermore is unique in the sense that you're not going to see a lot of these jasper dial watches, but also in the fact that that specific stone is unique to that watch. He's got a couple of onyx dial Rolexes, He's got, I see a ferrite dial, which has a really cool sort of black and gray motif to it this is on a day date. And so I highly recommend you check out the store, even if it is to just browse and look at the different types of watches. I see a day date with a wooden dial with some interesting, obviously gem settings, which is quite cool. But those types of unique dials is what I'm talking about. So check out the Amsterdam Vintage Watches store. I highly recommend you check out their Instagram as well. Really great content there. So I'm sure you can get from the Amsterdam Vintage Watches site over to their Instagram. But check them out, because I think even if you aren't buying, I think it's cool to consume it. So you've seen a ferrite dial day date. It's definitely cool. All right, so my last thing that I wanted to chat about was an article written by Hodinkee. James Stacey put out the staff's pick, the 25K collection reset challenge, which is basically create a watch collection, a hypothetical watch collection for a budget of $25,000. There's some cool diversity in this collection. I have to admit, I love Tony Treina's combo here. He was going to go for a GMT Master with the Pepsi bezel, probably a 16750. And then a really, really beautiful Blanc Pas. I believe it's a perpetual calendar, which, the combination is elegant. You've got your sports watch with that vintage vibe to it, and you've got a really nice Blanc Pas perpetual calendar, which is a little bit on the dressier side. I'll also give a shout out, obviously, to Ben. Ben's decision was great. Speedmaster, Speedy Pro with a Headlight bezel, and a really beautiful Lange & Söhne from like the 90s, which is the Saxonia, which is a pretty nice combination. And so check out some of the other people who've come up. Danny Milton's got his. There's some other people who've got some picks, which I think are really great. But it got me thinking, what would I do with $25,000? I'm not sure. I think I lean towards something like that Pepsi GMT that Tony mentioned. You could also maybe look at like some sort of like 90s sub on that. But then I think I would want to put a decent amount of that $25,000 into like some really cool vintage pieces. So like something like a very simple Calatrava from like the 60s from Patek Philippe, or like a really beautiful like ultra thin from Audemars Piguet, something like that, because you can get those pieces for a fairly decent budget. You don't have to be spending the world for something like that. But then I'd also want some some small things, like for example we have this Longines Barlow reference 700 with this really unique case design. I think you can get something like that for very inexpensive, in the grand scheme of things, an inexpensive amount, which makes that kind of exciting. So a lot of these collections on this article are sort of 2-watch collections, but I think you could stretch it and really build something out much. You could have a couple more watches in there just to experience something else. Even something that's crossed my mind recently has been like pocket watches, and whether you would put maybe some sort of like vintage pocket watch in here. There's so much you can do with this, and I think that's what I wanted to mention. So check out the article, but I'd love to hear what your collection would be for $25,000. So hit us up on Instagram or on our website. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think about all these topics. I'd love to chat with you about them. So as always, head over to our website. You can contact us there, or head over to our Instagram. Probably the easiest ways to get in touch with us. I put my question of the day, so what my question of the day is. What's your 25K collection? If you could, would love to hear your thoughts on that. If you are new to the Life on the Wrist podcast, be sure to rate this podcast and follow us. Share this with a friend who might be interested in a watch podcast. We'd love to have you guys as listeners. If you are new to Life on the Wrist, head over to lifeonthewrist.com. We published an article about range of topics, but vintage is really where I enjoy the most. So I spend a lot of time on that sort of genre. If you wouldn't mind liking this podcast, it really does help me out. And with that said, guys, as always, have a great week. Thank you for listening to this podcast, and we will catch you in the next one.